Welcome to Hotter Than Ever, where we uncover the unconscious rules we've been following, we break those rules, and we find a new path to being freer, happier, sexier, and more satisfied in the second half of our lives. I'm your host, Erin Keating. What I'll say by way of an update is that there is a lot of change afoot in my life. It's like since my separation 3 years ago and turning 50 and getting laid off from my last corporate job, and you all know my story, it feels like there has been nothing but change. So when my therapist asked me a few months ago when my life was feeling really stuck, she was like, "What are you still holding on to?" I was feeling like I wasn't making the kind of progress I wanted to make professionally, and my personal growth felt a little stalled out. I had kind of a dark night of the soul, and she asked me, "What are you still holding on to?" And I thought, nothing. I have experienced so much loss and so much change and upheaval in the past 3 years, and I'm not complaining. It's all ultimately been for the best, but it would be a lie to say that it hasn't been hard. I thought to myself, what else could there possibly be to let go of? But there was one big thing. There still is one big thing, and that is my house. My beautiful mid-century dream house that I bought with my own money when I was at the top of my professional game, and I was in a couple with 2 corporate incomes. And, I felt like I had earned this from working hard to build my career for 20 years. This was my dream. This is what I wanted. And that house is now insanely and unrealistically expensive to carry as a single mom and entrepreneur who is looking to never go back to corporate life again. And it's been a process. And I'm not through to the other side, but I did put my house up for sale in this weird market, and I'm going to move into a rental once it's sold, and we're in process. And it is sad. And it has been a journey to come to terms with the fact that I need to do it and then share that news with my kids and help be a container for their feelings. But I think my therapist was right. I was holding on to this house as the last vestige of my corporate keeping up with the Joneses married lady life, where everything looked good on the outside and was miserable on the inside. So that's what I've been up to so far this summer. That and starting a new business, which I'll tell you all about when the time is right. Spending a lot of time with my kids and spending some time with just one lover these days. Not because I don't want more, but that's just where we are in the roster of it all. I've been seeing him very informally, but pretty consistently for the past year. I'm still randomly going on dates with other guys and looking for my, next committed boyfriend. But I am really grateful to my lover and the fun connection that we have whenever we're able to hang out. And when life is super complicated, it's nice to have someone who will always have some sweetness for you. And that's who he is for me. It's a very specific and lovely kind of intimacy and also escapism, and it is delicious. Today on the podcast, I talk with Alexandra Stockwell, MD, aka the Intimacy Doctor. Dr. Alexandra is widely known for her ability to catalyze immediate and profound shifts in high-achieving couples who want it all. Genuine emotional connection, sensual passion, and erotic intimacy. In my next big relationship, I want it all. Genuine emotional connection, sensual passion, erotic intimacy. And I think a lot of you probably want that too, whether you're in a committed relationship today or thinking about the next deep connection you're going to have in your life. Dr. Alexandra is a physician, coach, and intimate marriage expert. She's also the best-selling author of Uncompromising Intimacy, the creator of the Aligned and Hot Marriage Program, and host of the Intimate Marriage Podcast. We've put links to all of these things in the show notes so you can check them out after the episode. Dr. Alexandra has been featured in the New York Times, the Huffington Post, Rolling Stones, all the places you've heard of. And LA Weekly named her one of the top 10 relationship coaches to watch a couple of years ago in 2023. Dr. Alexandra is super smart, and I found the way she talks about relationships to be very deep and grounded. She focuses on vulnerability and connection, and we talked a lot about how important it is for women to figure out what they want outside the realm of their relationship and obligation to others, and the critical importance of pursuing your own happiness inside your closest relationships rather than constantly compromising. Her message is that unless you're in a truly toxic relationship and intimacy skills are learnable, which is a relief to me because I feel like I still have a lot to learn. This is one to share with your friends who are in committed relationships where they're hoping to get or stay really connected to their partners, or with friends who, like me, want to know how to do relationships better the next time. All right, let's get hot. Dr. Alexandra, welcome to Hotter Than Ever.
Erin, I'm so glad to be here. I love the name of your show. I'm a big believer in learning how to dial it up.
Oh my God, I love that. Thank you. I think we all want to dial it up and we do not know how, especially those of us who are in long-term committed relationships, which I was for a very long time. And I feel like you hold some wisdom in this space, both from your professional work, but also because you have been married for 28 years and you're a mother of 4. How do you do it? How do you keep it all going and good and strong?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that I wasn't born this way. I wasn't this way when I got married, and I have not had 20 years of ever more hotter than ever by any means at all. And like my experience, as well as my experience coaching women and couples, is that having a fantastic relationship is a learnable skill. And the real thing is that I found my way to those lessons. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been interviewing me. I would have been desperately listening every week, feeling like that's fine for other people, but I don't really think I can have it. And there actually is one thing that I want to disagree with that you said, which is that you think everyone wants it hotter. And I think we all believe in wanting that. But quite frankly, it can be super confronting as well and kind of mess with our identity if my identity is built around being dissatisfied in marriage. Not that I aspired to it, but you know, with time, I don't really know myself other than being dissatisfied in my relationship, then even when it's the very best transformation, any kind of evolution in our sense of who we are absolutely has the potential to be confronting and just ultimately more complicated, leading to self-sabotage and sort of a kind of uncertainty when it means letting go of something that has been so fundamental and foundational in our sense of ourselves. You're nodding. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think so. I think you can get sort of entrenched in the way that you think about if you're in a long-term committed relationship, which, you know, I was married for 17 years. And I would say like the last 5 were really not great. And I got very entrenched in the like, I'm right about X, you're wrong about Y. I think we get righteous. I think we get resentful. If we keep asking to get our needs met and they don't get met, but we stay in the relationship anyway, that's my story. You know, for the kids or for the what it looks like on the outside or for the, you know, because I wanted to beat my parents' track record at marriage and divorce, like all things that maybe ultimately turned out not to be reasons to stay married. But I think we retreated to our separate camps and our separate points of view, and being right became more important than reconciliation or intimate connection, which I felt at a certain point hopeless about.
Yeah. And I think there are multiple developmental stages in going from, let's say, the thick of it during the last 5 years of your marriage and being in a healthy, vibrant, erotically alive, relationship where you can be self-expressed, that there are many evolutionary steps in going from the one to the other. And sure, it includes wanting to be hotter than ever. It includes feeling worthy of having that. It involves confronting things that I just named and you've just named. And ultimately, at some point, it becomes relevant that attainment is the measure of desire. I don't think that is where we start, but ultimately, like, if you're not creating it, how badly do you actually want it? And I think any kind of conversation like this can be very complicated. It can go down the path of victim shaming and that sort of thing. And I am definitely not a fan of that. But at the point at which we are evolving ourselves into our next best iteration, there is a kind of Rubicon to cross, like, how much do you really want this? Because at this point, it's time to create it. Again, that is not the kind of question to ask when starting this journey, but it eventually does happen.
So explain what you mean by attainment as the measure of desire.
Well, so I just want to be really careful how I talk about this because it could come off as judgmental, and I really mean to say it as something inspirational. So if we think of like starting in preschool and then kindergarten and first grade and so on and so forth, when it comes to transforming our lives, whether it involves divorce and finding other partners or staying in the marriage, it doesn't really matter for the purposes of what I'm saying, that, somewhere, let's say we start in the equivalent of preschool with this, of realizing I actually want something better than what I'm experiencing. Like, that's about the level of awareness that I'm, with this analogy, saying would be preschool. Okay. So if we fast forward all the way to PhD level in this, that is where it becomes relevant that attainment is the measure of desire. And what that means is, if you don't have it, do you really want it? Because at that level, if you don't have it, are you sabotaging yourself? Are you ambivalent about having it? Do you not feel worthy? It's typically not about not knowing how to create it when you're at the PhD level of transformation. And obviously there can be complete transformations that end in sixth grade and complete transformations that end with graduation from high school or getting a master's, whatever it is. But for someone who is on a very deep personal growth path, then at a certain point, when you've taken the courses, you've worked with the coaches, you've read the books, you've spent time with people who have what you want, like you've done all of the things and worked through the limiting beliefs, and yet you don't have it, that is where it becomes relevant. Like, well, is this something you really want? Or is there a cost to having your desires come true? A cost that you need to let go of certain things that are comfortable or certain relationships. So I feel like this is a very sophisticated point, and I don't even actually remember right now why I was making it, except to say, oh, because you had said, we all want to be hotter than ever. And I think in some contexts that's true, and in some contexts it's a question.
No, and I think that's right, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because I've certainly talked to people on this podcast who are like, yeah, I don't really care about sex or intimacy or my libido. I have no libido, so I'm this next chapter of my life is going to be who gives a shit about that stuff, right? And for some people that's totally great and that's the right path. I think the people that I am speaking specifically to are people who are peeking over the fence into what a life, looks like once you've blown it all up and you're reinventing. And that's certainly the my narrative. And also people who are looking over the fence and going, yeah, something has to change here. Like something has to change here because I feel like I'm on the verge of maybe this isn't working. People are on different parts of the journey of figuring out how long-term love and relationships fit into their lives over 40, when we change so much from 40 to 50 and 50 to 60 with the way that our hormones shift and the subsequent change in our priorities and desires and ability to just be kind of what you are when you have little kids, which is like a person who's in service, right? Like a person who's like, well, my life is all about taking care of these other people. But then when the noise of that phase sort of starts to simmer down and you're left with yourself and your own desires once again, what is it that you really want? What is it that you're craving?
And most women don't realize how good it actually can be. So even when it comes to identifying desires, I think most women order kind of short. Like so much more is possible. I interviewed on my podcast, the Intimate Marriage Podcast, a woman who'd been married for, I think it was 51 years when I interviewed her. And she said, and actually I interviewed her and her husband, and she said, we've always had a healthy sex life, but of course, over 51 years, there are ebbs and flows, and it's not 51 years of ecstasy. But she went on to say,
it's a constant orgasm for 51 years.
Yeah, no, that is not. Not if you get anything else done in life.
Right, exactly.
But she went on to say that the orgasms she's having now are better than she's ever experienced in her entire life. And I asked her, why is that? Like, what do you attribute that to? And she said, allowing herself to feel more pleasure.
Oh, God. That's true for so many people, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like,
and
that we stop ourselves from getting all the way there or going deeper into an experience of pleasure in our own bodies.
Yeah, or having orgasm, but not like losing ourselves and marinating in it and just having sensations that we can't schedule. Like really allowing ourselves to surrender to the experience. And as I've said before, like feel worthy enough, be willing to take the time that is necessary to have more pleasure than ever before. I happen to be a fan of quickies, but that is not the route to more capacity for pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a long-term relationship and it's cooled off, like so many do, and maybe sex is, perfunctory or infrequent or only on vacation, or, you're just giving birthday blowjobs, like, and you are a woman who senses like, there's something more for me, for us. Like, I'd like to get back to how we were in the beginning, or this particular moment in time, this feeling that I had, this connection to my partner through intimacy. How do you put your foot on that path? Assuming there's not like a ton of, rupture and a ton of betrayal and a ton of like underlying stuff, which for me was part of why we lost intimacy, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to answer, but I'm going to give a lot of context, both
Great.
Personal and conceptual. So let me share a little bit about my story. My husband and I are both physicians, and we met the first week of medical school and got together pretty soon thereafter. And we got married during medical school. I had my first child just at the end of my third year of medical school, second just before my internship. And the point I mean to convey is that basically the first 8 or so years of our relationship, we were studying really hard, working really hard, had babies in diapers. It was super ultra time intense. And
Yeah.
so we did not early on, go spend the weekend at the beach or lie in bed for hours eating chocolate and one another. Like, we never had a phase like that. So the whole
Mm.
phrase about like going
Getting
back to
back
how it
to,
was,
right.
that is not something that I would ever want to do. And what I would now say is that what we were having was functional sex. He was definitely having orgasms. I was definitely having orgasms. But it wasn't that afterwards I felt so much closer. Like
Mm.
Rumi writes such beautiful poetry about, the two lovers. They were always in one another. I'm obviously not quoting it exactly, but the point is that I'm a well-read person. I've read a lot of different poetry and novels and so forth, and I just didn't feel like we were tapping into this whole reservoir of what is possible.
Well, I
But
mean,
I
and your priorities were not that, right? Your priorities were
no,
like, we're building our careers, we're building our family, we're work, 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 we're getting our lives set up.
exactly. And so we had totally a collaborative, harmonious, wonderful marriage. Lots of other people like looked up to us wanting a relationship like we had. They didn't know what was or wasn't happening in the bedroom. I mean, we
Sure.
had 2 children, so that was proof of something. But,
Yeah.
you know, I always assumed that once we had more time together, because of the nature of our love of one another, that of course the passion and the erotic energy would expand, that they were tamped down because of all of the responsibilities, just like you said.
Hmm.
So now we fast forward, and I'm not working any weekends or nights, and he's mostly not working weekends or nights. We don't have, we do have 4 children, but we had 2 and then a pause and then 2 more. And so we have time where the kids are in bed, there aren't diapers to change, we're both at home, and to my total surprise, nothing really changed.
Mm.
And that was when I realized, oh, it's not just more time that we need. And for anyone who's got children in high school or have left home already, I have no illusion that just because you have more time for one another, things are going to naturally heat up. So I really wondered, was it even possible? Like the question you asked
Mm.
me was the question that I lived with at this time. And I'll also add the piece that, as I outline in the first chapter of my book, Uncompromising Intimacy, there really are 4 kinds of relationships. There's a toxic relationship, which is, I think, is fairly self-explanatory, except I'll just emphasize that in a toxic relationship, one or both people are always navigating anger and fear. Like it
Mm.
doesn't feel emotionally safe, or, and sometimes in other ways too. So that's a toxic relationship. And everything I'm about to say for the rest of this interview doesn't really pertain with a toxic relationship. Then because if you're in a toxic relationship, your priority needs to be to feel safe. And some of the things I'm going to suggest for how to turn up the heat and rekindle the relationship are not appropriate in a toxic relationship.
Fair enough.
Then there's a termination relationship, which is where the couple's together and maybe only one person knows it, maybe both, maybe other people, but basically they've agreed to stay together until the children are out of the house. And depending on which study you look at, it's up to a quarter of marriages where one person has decided, okay, I'm going to stay, for the sake of the children until the children are out of the house. A termination relationship where one or both people have already given up
Kind
on
of
the
checked out.
relationship,
Yeah.
that also is not the person that I'm speaking to.
Right. So that's also known as like gray divorce or something
Yes,
like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I
Gray
think gray
marriage.
divorce means something else. Gray divorce means it's the incredible phenomenon of the highest divorce rate being among older people, like people in their 60s and 70s. The divorce rate is like there are fewer married people at that age than, let's say, 30s and 40s. I don't actually know the most current data on this, but gray divorce refers to the phenomenon of the high divorce rate among older couples.
Okay.
But it seems like it would be a good term.
Right.
So to just
Sticking it
basically,
out until the kids are
exactly, exactly.
cooked. Yeah.
Then there's the toleration relationship, which is far and away the most common, where people are just bearing with how things are. They're putting their energy into other areas. It's kind of like what I described for my husband and me for the first 10 years. And it's where, like, especially for a highly accomplished woman, she'll be, in her power, managing people at work, really making things happen, feeling respected. And then she goes home and basically a part of her needs to be amputated when she walks in the door in order to fit into the toleration dynamics where typically both people, but anyway, she is just like putting up with things that she wouldn't choose, but she's not going to rock the boat, and she's just going to throw herself into volunteer activities or working out or, getting an MBA or whatever it is, having another child sometimes. And when she leaves home, then if she's like left part of herself at the door, she puts it back on and goes off to work to be a much more expressed, full person.
That hurts
And
so
then,
much to hear that description. But I feel like my marriage, I'm like all of these so far, but I relate to that, and I think there's probably so many listeners who are like, yeah, I'm totally successful in my outside the house life. I have been crushing it in my career. I have the degrees, and I have, I'm making money, and I've got the accolades, and I have professional standing and all of this stuff. But when I am at home in my relationship, I kind of have to shrink. I kind of
exactly.
have to adapt to the status quo and be a different person.
Yes. And one way to think of this incredibly painful phenomenon, although it tends to happen gradually and kind of like the frog that kind of
In the boiling water.
equilibrates as, yes, that it's not like suddenly it's like that. It is a cumulative slow burn that brings us to this situation. Like the
Hmm.
inertia drives us in that direction. Anyway, far and away the most common relationship advice that is given is that compromise is the way to be happy. If you want a great marriage, you have to be good at compromise. And the thing is that is completely false. If you want like a bland, pleasant companionship, which is basically a toleration relationship, no spice, no passion, just kind of status quo, then compromise will definitely get you there. But if what you want is a spicy, passionate, evolving, growth oriented, nourishing, fulfilling, erotically alive relationship, then uncompromising intimacy is the way to go. And the relationship that has the flavors I've just described, I typically refer to it as an intimate marriage or conscious partnership, where you really are growth oriented and take whatever arises and use it to grow yourselves and feel closer to one another. And one of the main ways to create that is uncompromising intimacy. And I don't mean uncompromising in the sense that you always get your own way, that you like rigidly stick to your views. No, no, no. It's more that where compromise is essentially withholding your desires, sometimes your challenges, your dreams, like your internal world, withholding that so as not to make your partner uncomfortable.
Mm.
And when it comes to uncompromising intimacy, it's all about learning to express authentically the truth of who you are in a way that your partner can hear it, ideally respond in kind, and you can be fully expressed within your relationship. That leads to uncompromising intimacy, conscious partnership, and a spicy, turned on, rekindled relationship. So I'll get very practical about
Yeah, I have
how
a
to
lot
do
of
that, but I
questions.
wanted
Yeah.
to kind of paint the landscape before getting so specific.
Yeah, I guess my question is, where does compromise start and end, and where does intimacy start and end? So are we talking about not compromising about your sexual desires, or are we talking about like, I hate jazz, like I am not going to go fucking see jazz with you because I don't like it, and actually I'm going to go see modern dance and I know you hate that. And so, like, let's all pursue the things we're passionate about, and if we have to do that separately, great. Like, let's find the places where we connect, and then, get a charge out of that, as opposed to suffering through each other's things. I like, and
Superb
I hate doing
question.
the dishes and you hate doing the laundry. So, let's all be uncompromising about the thing. Like, where intimacy is not just in the bedroom, right? Like, intimacy is throughout your closest personal relationships.
Absolutely. And you asked such an insightful question because the fact is that not for one night stands or the first month of dating, but when you have a long term committed relationship and you build a life with someone and you're waking up in the same house and going to sleep in the same house, same bed, then basically everything which isn't sex functions as foreplay. Like every interaction during the day, with going to jazz or modern dance, with whether you go to Italian or Thai for dinner, with whether if it matters to you, whether the toilet paper roll like comes out from the top or it comes out from the bottom. There is no degree to which what I'm saying it becomes irrelevant, and there's no way where it gets too big that it becomes irrelevant. It is basically anything that matters to you. So the first step really is knowing what you want, really taking the time to identify what desires you have in any part of your life
Mm-hmm.
that has to do with this other person. And when, like, I am a really big fan of building skills slowly. So the image of like using training wheels before going mountain biking. Like, I think all the skills that we're going to get into more and more, that you start with something small and fundamentally benign, because in fact, like, who cares which way the toilet paper comes out? But if
Right.
you start speaking up about what you want and you find the way to do that so that it's not nagging, it's not critical, and it's not shrinking, it's actually an invitation for connection. When you can do that with the toilet paper, then you can move on to which restaurant you go to and whether you're going to jazz or modern dance. Like, these are skills that are built, and you develop trust with one another, that you can navigate the differences and have it lead to more connection and more turn on. Then it's really just not that complicated to then apply the exact same principles when it comes to what kind of sex you're having, what kind of sexual acts appeal to you. But I wouldn't generally start there, because skills and content are not the same thing. And you can build the skills and then use them on the trickier content.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the first step really is knowing what you want. And I'm emphasizing this because I can't tell you how many women I have coached where they've been married for 17 years, 12 years, 37 years, whatever it is. And I say, okay, if we just summarily put aside what you believe would be best for your children, for your grandchildren when relevant, for your husband, for anyone that you're responsible for, you just put all of that aside for a moment. What do you want? And if a woman hasn't been coaching or doing therapy or been actively listening to your podcast or had some context to develop these skills, most often she gets quiet and realizes she has no idea. And there's nothing wrong with that, because if you did know what you wanted and you're in a toleration relationship, you really couldn't get anything done if you're constantly oriented to what you want but are not getting. So it makes sense that it's sort of like a cyst and you cover it over with putting your attention on other things. But the very first step to rekindling passion and heating things up in the bedroom is to take some time and figure out what you want. And I really don't typically see that that's going to start with sex. It's going to start with, how do you like your coffee? What kind of flowers do you want on your table? And there's a way that maybe you're listening and you're like, well, I know how I want my coffee and I want my home to be just so. I know what kind of flowers. Okay, so then those are not the examples. Do you know how you want to be kissed? Do you know at what point during dinner you want your partner to be making innuendos and invitations to have things be a little sexy?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when is it too early so it feels gross? And when do you wish he'd like wake up and pay attention and go for it and not be like waiting too long? Like, there are all kinds of arenas. Even what kind of car you drive. Like, did you choose the car which is totally practical? Great. I'm not talking about hearing me talk and then go buy a new car tonight. You could do that if you want to, sure. It's more like, take the time to discover what you like. Which brand of bottled water do you prefer? That's something that's so benign, but do you just take whatever's handed to you? Or have you taken the time to consider what's your favorite brand of bottled water? And if you're going to be drinking bottled water, make sure it's your favorite brand. Why wouldn't you? Nobody in the world benefits if you make a different choice.
Totally. For me, this has showed up so much in fashion, where it's like when I lived a certain other life and I felt like I needed to be a corporate person, and I was also, 30 pounds heavier, I found myself wearing clothes that if I looked at them today, I would be like, who is that? Who is that? That is a compromise, kind of uncool. No one would ever say this about me, but in my mind, an uncool version of myself. And so, like, in the last 3 years since my separation, I've been like, how do I want to dress? Like, what do I want to look like? How do I want to present myself in the world that makes me feel the most like me? And
yes,
it's
and
a
it's not
small thing, but it means so much to us.
And I love how you said it. You didn't say, how do I want to dress that's the most flattering? How do I want to dress so I look the best? Those are both great things. I'm not
Yeah.
against either one. But what you said is, how do I want to dress so I feel the most like me? That is basically having authenticity as the highest value.
Yeah.
And when it comes to rekindling passion, it's just not possible to sacrifice authenticity and be successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But so many of us are making constant compromises and going along to get along and feeling like, it's not worth the argument. Oh, it's not worth the potential conflict. Oh, I know my partner doesn't like blah, blah, blah. So I'm just not going to blah, or he doesn't like, we don't hang out with those friends anymore and I miss them, but like, it's not worth trying to go be hanging out with those friends if it's not going to be a couple friendship. Like, there's just death by a thousand cuts, right? There's just like so much when you talk about compromise. It really resonates for me because if you're compromising and compromising and compromising, it's very easy to lose sight of yourself.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So there are two things. I mean,
There are a
there are more
million
than that,
things.
but I want to share two things. And if you're listening and this speaks to you and you do these two things, you will absolutely experience shifts. So the first one is to cultivate curiosity. And this sounds so simple, so basic. Ask questions. Ask open-ended questions of your partner and of yourself that there isn't a right answer. It's really just an exploration and a discovery. And one of the ways that I want to frame this is that if you think, for those of us still married, perhaps for you far more recently, but if you think back to the experience of being in love, like really falling in love and just feeling incredible, one of the elements of that experience is just being flooded with curiosity. Like, what was your second grade teacher's name? What was your favorite vegetable when you
100%.
were a child? If you didn't live here, where would you love to live? What is your favorite music? Like, what do you love to do for fun? Like, we just could go on and,
Oh my God,
if you
totally.
were to get a tattoo, where would you want it? And what would it say? What are your favorite books? What are your favorite movies? Like, you know, how do you like to cook rice? Like, there really is nothing. Some things are more interesting, but just like
Right.
the experience of falling in love, of being in love, just includes so much fascination
Totally.
with this other person. And then your relationship becomes more solid, more secure. You feel safe, and also you know one another better. And one of the natural consequences is that we enjoy believing we know what our partner's answers are. And so we stop asking questions and put our attention in other places. But normal, natural, healthy humans continue to grow and evolve. So obviously, if you asked, what's your second grade teacher's name
Right. That's
early
not going to
on,
change. Right.
that's not going to change. But all the most interesting things are like, what are you most proud of in your life? And if you could have dinner with any celebrity, alive or dead, who would it be? And what would you want to ask them? What was the most challenging aspect of last week for you?
Mm.
Like, these can be whimsical questions, they can be spiritual questions, sexual questions, just depth of soul questions. Like,
Yeah.
what's a life lesson that you've applied? Like, literally, it could be anything.
There's that New York Times quiz, right, that
Yes,
guarantees it can
yes.
teach you how to fall in love with anyone in 36 questions. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes too. But I tried to do that with my last boyfriend. The only time I fell in love after my marriage for about a year. And I'm really relating to this because it's relatively fresh for me, where like I literally was like, look how he makes eggs.
Yes,
Like,
yes, yes.
look how what his trunk is like and what's in there. Like, look how he has like boots that he sends back to the place to get repaired instead of just getting a new pair of boots. Like, everything about him, I was like, I'm fascinated by every piece of like what defines your character, and who you are. Like, it was exciting to have all those feelings and questions and mystery, you
And the
know.
act of discovery is just so compelling. So, yeah, that's beautiful. I love what you've shared. And in how you shared it, I can feel your enthusiasm as
Hmm.
opposed to your critiquing.
No,
And,
right.
but that is part of cultivating curiosity that is totally different from judgment. Like, one of the most important things in cultivate curiosity is, I use the term, is that the other person can never have a wrong answer. I mean, you might not like it, but you can still be a yes to the fact that they're sharing. So when it comes to cultivate curiosity, yes, there certainly the 36 questions from the New York Times quiz, there are also so many different card decks that some are like general life questions, like I've given a few examples. There are some that are particularly for romance, particularly for like more sexual intimacy. There just are a lot of, if you just look on Amazon or Google it, there just are many different companies that have lots of card decks. And actually, I had a client, her husband never knew that we were coaching together. She was partnered, but it made sense for her to coach with me. And so but she felt like pressure. She felt like she wasn't creative and she couldn't come up with good questions. I don't think that would be an issue for you, Erin, but this was her issue, one of her issues. She's like a very like straight scientific kind of person. And so she got one of these decks with like 100 question cards, and she kept them in the island in a drawer in her kitchen, and she was the only one who cooked in their relationship, so he wasn't going to like open it and find them. And so when she was making dinner, she'd just like pull out two and just memorize them. You know, she'd read it and then leave them there. And then over dinner, not as like, oh, let's formally ask one another questions, but just as regular dinner conversation, she'd introduce one or two questions each night. And she was just astonished at the warmth that grew and how her husband, who tended to be kind of worn out at Monday through Friday at the end of the workday, like he opened up, he told her stories. They'd been married for close to 30 years. He told her stories she'd never heard before. And they ended up being more honest with one another about concerns and sort of self-questioning and how they were parenting their adult children. And it just was a very meaningful time to have dinner together, instead of before it felt like to her that they always had the same, how was your day? And, it was just like the same conversation over and over again. So that can sound, okay, if you want to be like having great ecstatic sex, how is asking questions about favorite movie characters going to help? Well, when you cultivate curiosity, when you turn with fascination to your partner, first of all, you give one another the opportunity to feel seen and heard and receive attention, and that is very good for seasoning passion. And it contributes very, very profoundly to enhancing emotional intimacy. And when it comes to long-term relationship, emotional intimacy really is a prerequisite for sexual erotic intimacy. Again, one night stand, you don't even have to know the other person's name, and it can be a very fun, gratifying experience. But when it comes to someone you share a life with, if you don't feel that you can open your heart, if you don't feel that there's interest and attention in souls connecting, it is very hard to feel right about having bodies connect. So if you want more passion, one foundational thing is to really up the emotional intimacy. And so cultivating curiosity is one way to do that. And then the other way that I want to describe is to communicate with more vulnerability. And I want to be very clear. I do not mean vulnerable in the sense of weak. And I definitely do not mean vulnerable in the sense of be a soft woman. One of the things that is just, I just love it when I see a woman's face and she hears, I'm not going to be coaching her to be like soft and feminine and like, I just think that teaching is ridiculous. It is another form of compromise. I mean, if your native way is to be soft, feminine, and wear pink pastels, and you've been overriding it with like a corporate armor, soul armor, then for you, where that's the case, then being uncompromising means being more feminine and whimsical.
Right.
But it is not a strict formula. If you're a badass woman, if you are strong and decisive, well, of course that's what you want to bring to your relationship. So for anyone who wonders why I'm saying this, is because there are a lot of people who teach women need to be soft in order to allow their men to feel more masculine, and that is just a load of compromising crap.
There's a lot of garbage in language around being in your feminine and being in your masculine, and like, because we are leaders and because we are achievers and because we are successful and highly capable and functional and make money and have a presence out in the world, that somehow that's emasculating, and that it's on us to soften, to change, to adapt, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, to the degree that those behaviors are overcompensating and whatever, like, fine. If you can't ever be soft and vulnerable, then that's something to look at. But there isn't like a blanket, like, oh, well, if I act this way and I adopt this sort of trad wife garbage, or, decide to wear all pink and flowers, that's somehow all of a sudden going to make my partner assertive and, take me in the way I want to be taken in the bedroom. Like, I just feel so,
Wrong.
it's so wrong, and it's so untrue, and it's so anti-feminist, and it's so fucking, always the solutions are women, you need to change. Women, you need to
Well,
change.
there's one situation in which I think it's helpful, and
Great.
only one. I
Great.
mean, there's where it's your native way and you're like covering it up with something. But I think of it similar to the way it works with diets. Because if someone is eating the standard American diet, meaning McDonald's, French fries, milkshakes, like just white sugar, white flour, very few fruits and vegetables, what actually is the standard American diet,
Yeah.
for such a person, it will absolutely contribute to their becoming healthier if they adopt any diet, whether it's vegan or keto or Mediterranean or fasting, like, whatever it is, they're going to get very positive results because it is being intentional and it is an improvement over the standard American diet. However, at the point at which someone is already healthy, there definitely are important distinctions for health when it comes to plant-based and keto
Sure.
and Mediterranean and all those things, which you and I are not getting into right now, but I just want to use that as a principle that just becoming more intentional is helpful. So if you and your spouse have been relating more or less the same way for a long time and you're not feeling connected and fulfilled, then any change is going to bring attention. It's going to change the routine. It's going to interfere with the kind of formulaic and familiar. And so anything you do is going to be a help and add more energetic flow between the two of you. But if you are somebody who is used to taking responsibility and being growth oriented and figuring out what's actually going to work, then those teachings really have no place. They're just a very fancy version of you woman should compromise and hope it works out. Okay, so what do I mean when I talk about making a vulnerable share? It is never to eliminate your powerhouse badass qualities, but often it's very helpful to expand your range, not to diminish it, not to exchange it, but to expand it. And so, for example, let's say I have an early morning tomorrow because I have a very important business meeting. And so I want to take a bath and get to bed so that I can get up in the morning and do what I need to do to be successful with my presentation. So I say to my husband, would you clean up the kitchen? Not that it's my job to figure out who does it, but we have a conversation. Or maybe he just offers, I'll clean up the kitchen. So I get up the next morning, well rested, excited about my presentation, and I go into the kitchen, and my heart just sinks, and my energy drops because it's clear he fell asleep in front of the TV, and he didn't do anything there. So what are you going to do about it? I'm going to detail a bunch of different ways that really are not helpful. One is to just start like clamoring around in the kitchen, making a lot of noise, cursing him under my breath. I mean, maybe you do that, no problem. But that is actually not going to help create more connection, nor is it going to change his behavior in the future.
Right.
You could just like do nothing, and then resentment grows and leaks out at some point down the line. You could go treat him like an additional child and inform him that he was very bad and he shouldn't have done that, and for those of you who aren't watching on video, I'm like shaking my finger, like it's the whole phenomenon. We can all hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole phenomenon of treating our men like another child. And
yeah, I'm working on that one.
That will not do anything for your relationship either. And there are so many other ways in which we tend to do these things, text and say, I was really disappointed. Like there's so many ways. But actually the most effective, probably not that morning because I'm going to go do my presentation, but maybe that evening, I'm going to say to him, I have something vulnerable to share with you. Are you available to hear it? And I want to emphasize, I'm not just launching into it. No matter how great my technique is, I'm going to start by saying, I have something important. I have something vulnerable. I have something really meaningful for me, whatever it is, whichever phrasing I want to use in the moment, to share with you. Are you available to hear it? There is something very powerful neurologically for the other person to say yes. Even if you say the exact same thing, it's going to be so much more successful if you don't just start into it, but you first ask if they're available and they say yes. And it has to be a real question. So they might say no, but if this is a committed partner, then the no should be not yet. So if they say no, you can say, okay, tell me a good time.
Yeah.
Anyway, then I'm going to say, not, you really should have done the dishes, you fucking asshole. Like, I'm not going to do any of that. What I'm going to say is, when I got up this morning and I saw the kitchen, I felt really hurt. I felt taken for granted. I felt like who I am and my needs didn't matter to you. And I felt unseen in a way that I don't want to feel with you. I probably, in the case of my husband, would say, I know you didn't mean to create this experience or contribute to this experience, but I just feel really hurt. Mm-hmm. In other words, I could go on the attack.
Right.
With
you
all
did this
the
and
reasons.
You did that and you promised this and you don't and you betrayed and you blah, blah, blah. Right.
But when I talk about making a vulnerable communication, what I'm really talking about is letting him feel the impact of what happened without specifically blaming him for it. Because the fact that my walking into the messy kitchen this morning, to me, I felt unloved. That's my interpreting it that way. That is about me. Like that my go-to is I don't feel loved, or I feel taken for granted, or, we each have our various stories and fundamental limiting beliefs. So that's not on him. But if he doesn't ever have the opportunity to feel the impact, not just have me instruct him, not just have me, blame him, but to be willing to let him feel what's in my heart, it will mean that his leaving the kitchen messy ends up leading to more connection between the two of us rather than more disconnection. And as far as I'm concerned, the goal is to cultivate the skills so that whatever happens, whether it's conflict or erotic ecstasy, whatever it is, you can use it to be closer with one another.
I really, really see how that could work. I really, really see, especially if you're with someone who really wants to be in a happy relationship and is willing to look at their own stuff and go, oh, I would never want to make you feel that way. And that's why I'm going to change my behavior in the future.
Exactly.
Sometimes you're not with that partner.
No, and
you
that's
know?
why I wanted to talk about the different kinds of relationships, because this is a conversation that would happen in, again, what I call an intimate marriage,
Yeah.
where intimacy is alive and well. And it's something that could happen in a toleration marriage when you're in the process of building intimacy, but it isn't really anything that there's any point in doing if things are, if you're in a toxic relationship or in a toxic phase of your relationship. And same thing with termination,
Yeah.
because there has to be care,
Yeah.
like care, so that when you're willing to give the incredible gift of letting him feel how it feels to you, then, and he, receives that as the gift that it is, then it can serve in the ways that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I think it's right that in a long term relationship, you can't fix the bedroom stuff without first working on all of these other pieces. And this curiosity and connection, vulnerability, knowing what you want. I think it's all so important. I feel like hotter than ever, we should make a card deck that helps women figure out what they want, to answer the
Amazing.
questions of what they want. Because I love all of those, just like to have the prompts in your hands so that we get to know ourselves better so we can live the lives we really want to live. I love your tone and your vibe. I feel so comforted by your approach and this sort of thoughtfulness with which you come to this conversation. I'm so happy to be talking to you. And I wish that we didn't have to end this conversation. So I want to ask you one more question, which is, this Hotter Than Ever is really all about giving women permission and ideas for how to do things differently in the second half of their lives. What do you want the listeners to take away from this conversation about what is possible for them in their intimate and sexual lives over 40?
What I want you to take away is that you have done all kinds of challenging things, many things that no one else has done before, other things that few people haven't, whether it's, you're the first in your family to go to college, you're the first to, you don't even have to be the first. That's not important to the point I'm making, but that you've been successful in your career, that you've raised children, that you keep a house clean, like whatever it is, you do so many, many, many things every single day that you were not born knowing how to do, and that you didn't just automatically know because of how your parents raised you. And that skill of being able to take what you were given and make more of it, 100% is relevant in the bedroom too, and in emotional intimacy too. And the main thing that holds people back is not having the education. So I really hope that as you listen, you know that more is possible, and that if you want more, that you make a point of getting yourself some education, because that is the only thing between what you're experiencing that's challenging and disappointing and experiencing something that would be so enlivening and fulfilling. It's learning how.
I love it. I love that these are learnable skills, that this isn't just magic. And if you didn't get it in your family of origin, then you don't get to have it. I love it. I love it. And if you have a partner who's willing to go on the ride with you, like that is everything.
And actually, I want to add one thing. Because this question of whether or not you have a partner who's willing to go on the ride with you.
That's a big mystery for me. Where is he? Where do I find him?
Okay, well, I'm not going to answer that, but I am going to say.
Maybe you know someone cute. Anyway.
Okay, well, I'll keep it in mind. But what I want to say is that you may be listening and know you definitely have a partner who's willing to go on this journey and really up-level the quality of your connection together. And that is awesome. Then great, get started. You may also know with a kind of certainty that it sounds like you really had, Erin, that your partner is just incapable of this. But there's a whole group of people, women who you think your husband is not capable of growing in this way. And once you change and let go of blame and connect with your desire and your own turn on and make a point of feeling hotter than ever, whatever that means to you, and however it is that you achieve that with your body, with your mind, with your heart, with your purpose, that the more you manage your own happiness or pursue your own happiness, manage isn't the right verb, but like the more you feel your own source of your happiness, then some of you are going to be wonderfully surprised at how your previously kind of stuck men have become more responsive, because so much of what we're talking about is led by women, and we can resent that, we can opine about it, but
Right.
that's just the truth. So I've talked to too many women who've said, oh, my husband would never want to do couples coaching. He's definitely going to say no. And I say, well, don't ask him if he wants to do couples coaching. Ask him if he wants to have one conversation with me. And some of those men say no, and we never talk. But 100% of the time, the men whose wives have said, oh, he's not interested at all, well, after talking with me, and not because I'm manipulative, but they hear I'm not blaming them. Like I have their back too.
Right, right.
They are interested in pursuing it. And so, yeah, some, you've got an awesome partner who's ready to go with this. He just wonders how. Some, it's impossible. But there are many that you really don't know until you walk the path and see if they're excited to go with you.
I love that, Dr. Alexandra. I love the optimism, the hope, and the possibility that lives in there. And I'm grateful for you and the work you do.
Thank you, Erin. What a beautiful conversation with you. And I'm excited to have you on my podcast too.
Yes. Thanks for listening to Hotter Than Ever. I hope you enjoyed this conversation about love and relationship and marriage and intimacy. Is there someone in your life who needs to hear this conversation? Someone who always comes to you with their fears and concerns about their relationship, or who's looking for ways to reconnect with their partner? Share it with them right now. They will thank you for Dr. Alexandra's wisdom, and then you can take some of the credit. Hotter Than Ever is produced by Erica Gerard and Podkit Productions. Our associate producer is Melody Carey. Music is by Chris Keating, with vocals by Isa Fernandez. Wish me luck with my house sale and my eventual move and all the big changes that are happening in my life this summer. I hope that yours is more carefree and that the biggest challenge you face is getting the sand out of your car after a week at the beach.